Hi, I'm Shiro. Welcome to the Matsunoki Cafe. Here we like to talk about video games, movies, or just whatever stuff considered nerdy or nostalgic is on our minds. So whether you're new here or you're a returning customer, why don't you stick around and enjoy the conversation with your cup of joe? Today, we'll be taking a look back on Yu-Gi-Oh! As a franchise, where it started, how it became the juggernaut that it is today, and examining how the anime changed and evolved over time. For those who don't know, Yu-Gi-Oh! Started off as a manga in Shonen Jump by Kazuki Takahashi that ran from 1996 to 2004. The card game that spawned from it was released in 1999 in Japan and 2002 in North America. So this year, 2022, marks the 20th anniversary for Yu-Gi-Oh! Here in the West. To celebrate, I want to take a look back on everything I've experienced with Yu-Gi-Oh! Feel free to share your own experiences with the franchise in the comments. Let's start off with the biggest part of the franchise itself, the card game. I've never played a single game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And I can say the same thing about every card game series I've gotten my hands on. I much prefer collecting cards over playing games with them. But that also means I don't have that many cool cards that are busted or anything, especially since I stopped collecting around Arc 5. The only cool card I really have is this Obelisk card with Takahashi's signature on it. I got this in a Shonen Jump issue that was released to English audiences. This has a Yu-Gi-Oh! Chapter that was meant to tie into the Dark Side Dimensions movie. Trust me, I did not get this for Boruto. If I remember right, I got this book at a Scholastic Book Fair at my old elementary school. So yeah, my only experience with Haikyuu is the one chapter that I read in like 7th grade. Speaking of manga, let's talk about that, shall we? I just so happen to own the first volume of the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga right here. And I remember being pretty young when I got this book. I think one of my cousins gave it to me because I was just getting into the card game a bit when I was little. I'm sorry if the first half of this video seems like me bragging about my Yu-Gi-Oh! Collection. It's not that big, it's just, I need something to talk about. Compared to the anime we have now, it's pretty surprising that the series started off as a horror manga. You think I'm joking? The initial premise of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that high schooler Yugimoto obtains the Millennium Puzzle from his grandpa. Upon finishing the puzzle, Yugi gets possessed by the spirit of an ancient pharaoh that was locked away inside the thing. So far, sounds like what you remember, right? Well, this is where it takes a turn. The Pharaoh, in these early days of the series, is much more sadistic compared to the one presented in Yu-Gi-Oh!'s more modern take. The first game he ever plays in the manga is forcing a dude to stab stacks of cash without stabbing his hand. When the dude tries to cheat by stabbing the Pharaoh makes the bully hallucinate that he's surrounded by money. Next time you see the bully, he's laying around in leaves and trash thinking they're money. Yeah, that's another thing that sets this early part of Yu-Gi-Oh! And the rest of the franchise. It wasn't focused on one single game. It started off as an episodic series where a person would do something awful, usually to one of Yugi's friends, and the Pharaoh would take over and challenge the antagonist to a shadow game and making them suffer horrific losses. So if you think about it, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is basically the first ever Squid Game. If you want some examples from just this first volume of what kind of punishments the Pharaoh brings down on his opponents, let's see here. We have him ruining a man's eyesight to make him see everything in mosaic censoring, making an escaped convict burn himself alive after getting himself covered in vodka, and magically removing all makeup on his teacher's face, as well as remodeling her face before she can expose one of Yugi's friends for writing a love letter. That last one is kind of based, not gonna lie. So you must be wondering how the series transitioned into primarily being about a singular card game. Well, we have Seto Kaiba to thank for that. In his first manga appearance, he challenged the Pharaoh to a game of Magic and Wizards, which would later become known as Duel Monsters. People really liked the idea of this card game and wanted to play it themselves, so Takahashi decided to make the series solely focused on that. You know, he had to make sure his manga stayed alive in Shonen Jump somehow, guys. The differences between manga and anime don't stop there, though. For later arcs of the anime, such as GX and 5Ds, they get their own manga counterparts that came out after the anime. What's funny is that outside of a shared main cast and basic premise, the mangas have nothing to do with the anime they're based off of. Like, This dude on the cover of the 5Ds manga doesn't exist in the anime, but he plays a pretty sizable role in this first volume, as well as the manga as a whole, from what I've heard. I also saw that GX has a completely different story from what happens in the anime. I remember reading the Zexal manga from the library when I was younger, and while the story was different, it wasn't as drastic as GX due to it still being a collectathon story for the number cards. I also noticed by looking at this volume of 5Ds that Kazuki Takahashi isn't listed on the manga outside of his original run. He's supervised these spin-off manga, but wasn't as directly involved like being the writer or artist. Let's talk about the actual anime now. I'll only briefly go over each series of the anime, and I'm only going from the original to Arc 5. These are the series I remember watching as a kid. I haven't touched a single episode of Reigns or Sevens, so it wouldn't be right for me to cover them. For those who have seen them, tell me if they're good or not in the comments. I might check them out if I hear enough good things about them. I forgot to say this in the recording, but I will not be going into spoilers. I will just be going over general stuff. So if you haven't seen the anime, any part of it, don't worry, you're good. You can watch this part of the video. The OG series is still good to this day, but it has its growing pains for sure. You know, duels take a lot longer, the rules kind of got thrown out the window a lot of the time, plus the filler arcs just were so boring. Like, yeah, the other series have had their weaker or boring points, but never to the extent of a whole season's worth of episodes. Still though, the original series has its strong points. There's a reason its cast is the most well known from the entire franchise. The villains are great, the main heroes are pretty good. Kaiba is the most iconic rival in Yu-Gi-Oh! For a reason. And the Egyptian mythology angle was pretty cool, things considered. So yeah, still something you can go back and watch and enjoy, but I feel other seasons did things better. Jazz it up! Jazz it up! My favorite Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, although it wasn't that way initially. I remember not liking GX all that much when I was little, but it shot up in my personal rankings after I watched the whole series subbed a couple years back. I think this part of the series got a lot of flack back in the day for two reasons. One, it was following up on the original, and anything was going to look bad in comparison to that, especially when GX was just starting. And two, I feel like 4Kids screwed over GX more than any other part of Yu-Gi-Oh! Pretty much everyone in the anime community knows about 4Kids and their abysmal dubbing practices at this point. I don't need to give you guys the whole rundown. Now, did GX get as butchered by 4Kids as, let's say, One Piece? No, but GX and 5Ds share second place compared to everything else the company got their hands on. Everything in GX got Americanized, even more so than the original and 5Ds, and I feel that was mainly because the series was clearly set in a Japanese high school. So nobody in the main cast, not even the main character, got to keep their original names in the dub. Sure, that meant we got the Chaz, but that's like the only positive. And this has nothing to do with the voice actors. They did the best they could with the material they were given. Another way 4Kids screwed over GX was by not giving viewers back then the full show. Season 4 of GX has still not been dubbed to this day, and 5Ds never got fully dubbed either. To be honest, I don't think either will receive English dubs. This show exists mainly to promote the cards at this point, so releasing and promoting seasons that feature older rules and formats just wouldn't make sense marketing-wise. The original sub version of GX is the way to go, and I'll say that about every series. I love Judai as a character, and his major arc in the last two seasons is pretty amazing if you ask me. Season 4 was pretty short and felt rushed, but it still stuck the landing when it came to wrapping everything up. GX starts off as a bit of a slow burn, but once it picks up, you're in for a fun ride. Speaking of rides, I've seen a good amount of people over the years say 5Ds is the best series of the anime. While I prefer GX, 5Ds is definitely in my top 3. There's a lot more to this series than just playing card games on motorcycles. I haven't watched Akira, but it's clear to see 5Ds draws inspirations from it. There's themes of classism, discrimination, cults, robots, time travels, like what the hell? Obviously, that's a lot more serious subject matter compared to high school drama, so 4Kids really cut down on 5Ds more grim aspects to soften it for children. And like I said earlier, the dub already suffers from it being cut short. Still though, 5Ds is actually some pretty great stuff. If you're looking for a slightly more serious version of Yu-Gi-Oh! I mean, they're still solving world-ending disasters with card games. It's not that serious. I'd recommend giving this series a watch. Zexal is good. You guys are just mean. Also, yes, I'm pronouncing it Zexal because it sounds cooler. Yuma definitely isn't as skilled at dueling as the other protagonists, but I think that's kind of his charm. He commonly loses, but he keeps throwing himself out there and slowly improves. Yeah, Astral holds his hand a little early on, but Yuma definitely learns to competently duel on his own as the show goes on. I will say this series starts off pretty rocky, but the second half of Zexal is where the story starts hitting its stride for me. Even before that, the cast is pretty enjoyable. I grew to like Yuma and Astral's dynamic as it went on, and I liked Yuma's rivals, Kite and Shark. And I really enjoyed one of the big antagonists for the second half of the series. For those who have watched Zexal, you already know who I'm talking about. But yeah, overall, this is a pretty enjoyable part of Yu-Gi-Oh! And I would recommend giving it a shot. It was around the time Arc 5 was coming out in the West that I stopped following Yu-Gi-Oh! And collecting the cards. It wasn't that I hated Arc 5, I was just entering high school at the time and I was getting into a lot more series and franchises. Yu-Gi-Oh! Just sadly got pushed to the wayside for me. But I have to say, and I know I might get the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community coming after me for this one, Arc 5 is pretty decent. It's far from the best series of Yu-Gi-Oh! In my opinion, but it's fun. Yuya is my personal favorite protagonist from the 5 I've seen. While he's around Yuma's level of skill at dueling, Yuya's fun attitude and his love for performing made him really charming. Plus, I think Pendulum Summoning is pretty cool, although I can admit it was pretty busted. Arc 5 isn't perfect, as I think the series has too many characters for its own good, but I had a lot of fun watching it. It's gotta count for something. And that's all I have to say about my experience with Yu-Gi-Oh! But hey, feel free to comment below your own personal experience with this franchise. How'd you get into it? What series of the anime is your favorite? Stuff like that. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel so you can see more from me in the future. I guess it's time to close up shop. It was nice chatting with you all today. I hope you come visit the cafe again soon. Until then, stay safe out there, everyone.